Welcome back to this third Pro Tools lesson for Library at the Dock. You should have your Pro Tools session loaded up with this little drum beat that we worked on. Now, before we get into mixing and mastering, I want to build this track out a little bit. And now that we've got these drum beats chopped up onto the grid, I want to demonstrate that you can actually just move these drums about and change the rhythm. So we could click and drag this hat about anywhere on this grid, and it's probably going to sound pretty good because it's going to be in time because it's on the grid. So, you could move the snares about. Now, if you want to copy one of these over instead of moving, just press Option before you click and drag, and that will copy and make a new version of that little clip. If you wanted to duplicate this hi-hat across the rest of this drum break, just select the first one and press Command D, and that will copy that hi-hat all the way across. So let's have a listen. If I click on the last one and hold down Shift and select the first one, it's going to select all of them. And then when I press play, it's going to loop this drum break all the way across. Now, if I hit solo over here, it's going to play me just the hi-hats. Then I unsolo. So you can see I've copied this hi-hat all the way across. So just have a little play around and move some of these drum hits around and find a beat that you're happy with. So I've created a beat that I'm happy with here. I'm now going to demonstrate how to record audio into Pro Tools, which will be useful for just about anything. So this sample track here, we're not using anymore. So let's repurpose this and we'll record some claps over the top of this drum beat. So double click on the sample name and let's call this claps. Now, to record audio into Pro Tools, there's a few things that we need to do. We need to make sure that the input is selected. At the moment, this input is grayed out, so the input is there will be no audio coming in. So if you click and hold on this and select your input of your microphone. Now, before we go and record some audio onto this claps track, we need to give ourselves a bit more drums to play with, because these drums at the moment only go for a few seconds. So if we click and drag a box on the bar across all of these drums to make sure they're all selected, and the selection goes up to the bar marker here, bar 1, at the end of bar 1, and we press Command D, we can copy this over to bar 2, Command D again and again, and let's copy that over for 4 bars, which is going to give us a lot more room to play with. Now, if we hit return on the keyboard, the playhead will go back to the start of the session, ready for us to record. Now, if we want to record audio onto this claps track, we need to make sure that our input's selected, and we need to press record enable, which is this little button here, and that will start monitoring your audio coming into your channel. Then press the record arm button up here and then play. Or instead of pressing these 2 buttons, you can simply press 3 on your keyboard. Now, once you press 3, I want you to clap your hands and record over some claps over the top of this drum break. And don't worry about getting it perfect. We'll edit it together later. Now that you've recorded some claps and you've pressed stop at the end, we can unarm this track, and you can see that we've got our claps here that we've recorded. Now, some of the claps towards the end I noticed clipped. That's when the VU meter reached the red point in here, and I think it was these 2 loud clips at the end. Let's just choose these first 2 claps here, which are recorded nice and quietly. Now, we're just going to use these 2 claps to duplicate across the rest of the track. So we can delete these other ones. And let's zoom in and have a look. This one looks like it's in time. It's on the grid. This first one looks like it's a little bit early. So what we can do is, if we actually put the mode back onto slip, we can select this little clip here and press Command D to chop, put it back onto grid, and then move this onto the grid. Now, let's get rid of all unwanted silence here as well. Just trim across, remove all the unwanted silence to make sure there's no unwanted noises in there. So now we've got 2 little claps here on the grid. We can select that bar and hit Command D and copy these claps across the rest of the beat. Let's have a listen, and we might need to turn the volume up so that we can hear these claps properly. So the claps are definitely there. We'll bring them out a bit more in the mix. Now, to demonstrate how to mix this track, I'd like to add in a few more instruments to overlay over our drums. So let's go up to track, new, and instead of choosing an audio track, let's go down to instrument track and let's create 2 stereo instrument tracks and click create. And we'll rename the first one bass, click OK, and rename the second one keys, click OK. Now, to add a bass instrument onto this track, we're going to use a plugin, and we're going to start to use plugins throughout the rest of this lesson. Plugins you add to your track by going into this Inserts A to E section, and these you can see here that you can add 5 plugins onto this track. If you run out of 5, you can just go up here and enable Inserts F to J, and you'll get more. But for now, let's just go to bass, and we'll go to this first grey bar and click, and you'll see you can select from a drop-down list, and we'll go down to Instruments and Expand To, which is the only instrument you get in Pro Tools first. Now this is Expand To, and you can see here it's got one preset down here, a bright pad. If we click on this little drop-down, we can go down to basses, and I'm just going to choose the first one, double bass. If you had a MIDI keyboard connected, you'd be able to play whilst selecting the name of this channel. If you played on your MIDI keyboard, it would be playing double bass now, but we don't have a MIDI keyboard plugged in. So what we can do here is, instead of showing the clips, we can actually change that to notes. And that's going to bring up a little keyboard here. What we'll do is we'll expand this out to jumbo so that we can see what we're doing. And let's go up to the pen tool, and we can actually draw in some notes here. Now you can see here on the left that this is a piano keyboard, and these lines here, these dark lines, correspond to the black keys on a piano keyboard, and the lighter colored lines correspond to the white keys on a piano keyboard. So you can see here that this is going to be a C down here. Now that's a bit too low, but if you click and drag, you can draw in notes. And then if you hover your mouse over, it becomes a pointer, and you can click and move that note up or down. So if you also click and drag, and while you're dragging you hold down Option, it will copy that note across. Make sure you don't let go of Option while you're copying. You can also trim the ends of the notes if you hover your mouse over the end. Once you have a few notes in there, I like to actually switch back to the Smart tool, because that means that you can click and drag about. You can still trim in the ends, and if you want to duplicate a note, just hold down Option and drag across. And also it means that you can click and select multiple notes and click and drag and copy them too. Let's close Expand to give us a bit more space. So just have a little play and see if you can make a bass line that you're happy with. Once you've got a bass line that you're happy with, go ahead and make a new plugin on the keys track and choose Expand again, but this time explore some different sounds. Maybe go down to electric pianos and choose something different, and make a keys layer that you're happy with that works with the bass and the drums. Okay, so I've just had a little bit of fun creating some different instruments there and some music. I've created a keys loop, a bass line, and I've even made a new instrument track and created a sort of pad string layer. So we'll jump into mixing this track now, and I'm going to teach you some principles of mixing. Now, let's just focus on the drums first. And what we want to do is create a drum bus. We want to send all these drums into one bus. Now, the way that we're going to do that is we're going to make a new auxiliary track. So let's go up to Track, New, and we'll make a stereo auxiliary input here and click Create. Now, here it is, it's called Auxiliary 1. Let's call that Drum Bus. And we'll set the input of this drum bus to bus 1 and 2. Now, buses are a way that you can route different audio from different channels through to other channels. So at the moment, nothing is set to bus 1 and 2, so nothing will be coming through into this channel. But what we want to do here on our drums is we want to set the output to bus 1 and 2. So we'll set the output of this hats. At the moment it's going to the master, but let's change that to bus 1 and 2 and set the output bus 1 and 2. I'm just going to mute all my instruments here. And actually let's send the claps to bus 1 and 2 as well. I'd treat them as drums. And actually let's drag the claps down. So now I've got all my drums here. And actually let's bring the drum bus down to just where the drums are. Okay, so we've got all the drums here. And let's play and see what happens. So you can see all of the drums are coming through this drum bus. Now if I mute that drum bus, nothing happens when I press play. So now you can change the volume, and that's going to turn all the drums up and down at the same time. We can put effects on here, and that's going to affect all of these 4 channels at the same time. Now what we want to do with drums is we'd like to probably EQ and compress these drums before they get to that master fader. So let's open up an effect here on this drum bus and go multi-channel plugin, EQ, and let's bring up a 7-band EQ. And we'll also bring up underneath that multi-channel plugin, dynamics, and we'll bring in a basic compressor. So let's take a low cut here. I'm going to take a low cut here, and I'm going to cut off some low end out of these drums. And I'm going to add in some low end to about 200 Hertz here. Now it's clipping the output, so I'm going to take the output down a bit. Also going to give it a bit of a snap at about 2K here. Now the compressor, what we want to do, let's see if we've got any presets here. There we go. Let's do drum compressor. Okay, that's sounding pretty good. The output we need to turn down because that's clipping. So take down the gain. Now we can always click bypass here to see what it sounds like without the effect. That's without the compressor, and this is with. Compressing is just going to even out everything. Let's add some reverb onto these claps that I recorded, which are very dry. So let's go here, plug in reverb. We'll just do deverb mono. It's sounding good. So listen to it with the drums all together. Now that we're happy with our drum mix, I'm going to add in some more instruments and do a mix for all of the other tracks in this song. It's probably best that we use the mix window because it gives us some larger faders. At the moment we're using the edit window, but if we go up here to the window menu and change to mix, we can open up the mix window. Now if your mix window opens up and it looks something like this, hover your mouse over the edge of the window and click and drag to expand that and make it a bit bigger. So let's have a listen. I'm going to add in one instrument at a time and just use these faders. If something sounds too loud, I'm going to turn it down. If something sounds too quiet, I'm going to turn it up. Okay, let's have a listen. Okay, I'm happy with how that's sounding. Now we can close this mix window and we'll start to structure out this song a little bit and build an intro, verses, and choruses. Now to do this, we're going to be copying these parts over throughout the whole track. And at the moment, they're all sort of disjointed little fragments. The best way to do this is if we can consolidate this into an audio file as such. Now, Before we go ahead and do that, and before I show you how to do that, what we need to do is just make sure that each of these little audio files is faded at the in and out. And that is because you can see that these audio files do not reach the 0 point, this 0 line here. When this waveform reaches 0, that is silence. So this purple file here is actually coming in not on silence, and that will create a little clip. Now the way that we can do that is by adding fades into each of these little clips, just a small fade. You might have noticed if you hover the mouse over the very corner of your clip up here, it comes up with this little box, and that is to, if you click and drag, you will create a fade, and that's a fade out there. But there's a better way to do this, and what you can do is just select all of the clips and press Command F. And here you'll bring up the fades dialog. This is going to be your fade in, and this is your fade out. And if there are any clips that are butted up next to each other, there will be a crossfade. For now, we've got a 10 millisecond fade in and a 10 millisecond fade out. Let's just see what happens when we press OK. So what that has done is, if we zoom in on something here, it's added a very small fade in and a very small fade out to everything there. But in fact, 10 milliseconds looks like it's almost too much. We only really need a very tiny fade in. If I select this fade here and press delete, you can see it's actually changed the sound there. We don't want to make it, we don't want the fade to be audible. We just want to take away any clicks and pops. So let's undo all of our fades by pressing Command Z. And we'll go back into the fade dialog again, press Command F. And instead of doing 10 milliseconds, let's make that 2 milliseconds. 2, and press OK. And then what that's going to do, let's have a look at our fades now. That's looking better. Just a very tiny fade there. Tiny fade in and a tiny fade out. And you won't hear that fade. It'll just mean that there's no clicks and no pops. Now, let's consolidate these regions and make them a solid block so that we can copy them out over the rest of the track. So I'm going to click on the bar there and select back. Now, it might be easiest for this section if we change our grid up here from 16th note. Let's just change it to 1 bar. There we go. Now we know that it's going to snap to the bar. So let's just select all of these on the bar like that, and we'll press Shift Option 3. And what that's going to do is it's going to consolidate all of these regions as solid blocks. MIDI notes are also going to be hard to copy across, and that's an easy fix. We can just change from notes to clips up here. And that's going to give us some solid blocks. Now, when we're copying out everything, it's probably best if we change the size of all the tracks to medium or small. So we can change all tracks at once, the track height at once, if we hold down Option, right click, and choose medium. You can see here that we can fit all of our tracks in the one window. So let's just do something here. We're going to select all and hit Command D to copy. Command D, let's do it 4 times. And then we can, if we select everything and go Command D again, Command D, and now we've got all our tracks copied out over a minute or 2. Now, if we want to create some choruses and intros, I'm going to treat this string part as a chorus. So I don't want that to come in for a little while. Let's delete these 4 here, and we'll delete these 4 here. We'll delete these 4 here. So there, I've got my chorus is this string section, and then I've got some verses in between. I might also create a little intro. Let's just start with the keys, and we'll bring in the drums later. So now what we have here, so I've copied everything out and I've deleted some sections. So now we're going to be starting with the keys, and then the bass and the drums are going to kick in for a little while, and then the strings are going to come in after that. Let's have a listen. Okay, so you can see that I've structured this song out a bit with some choruses and some intros and outros just by deleting different sections here after I've copied everything out. Now the next steps are to master this song and then export this as a WAV file or MP3. So to master the song, we're going to be working with the master fader here, and remember this is where all of the audio comes to. So we can add in some effects here, and what we're going to do is master this and bring it up to a proper level. So for this, I'm going to just click on one of the clips in the chorus here where I have all of the instruments playing, and I'm going to start bringing in a mastering effect, which is a compressor and limiter here. And let's just set the preset to clean limit. So the purpose of using the compressor is to raise the level of this track up to the maximum level without it clipping, so that when people play this, it's not going to be too quiet and it's not going to be distorted. So what we want to do is we want to take the threshold here down to where the volume that we can see here on this in fader is, and then we want to raise up the gain so that it's up towards the top here on the out. So we can change the threshold by moving this orange dial, or we can use this little orange triangle and move it down. And then once we've got that set, we'll increase the gain here and up until the volume is much louder up at the top. So let's go ahead and press play and we'll do that. You can see that it clipped there when I took the gain too high, but I backed it off a bit and it actually clipped the master fader here. But once I backed it off and I clicked the clip indicator to reset that, it didn't clip. So we've boosted up the level of this, and now we're ready to export this track. And to do that, what we want to do is select in the timeline here all of the section that we want to export. So we want to export from the start to the end. To export this as a WAV file, we're going to go up to File, Export, Audio Mix. And you can choose the file name and choose where you'd like to save it to and click Export. And there you are. You can see you've got a WAV file here of our finished song. So that concludes the Pro Tools lessons for Library at the Dock. We weren't able to cover absolutely everything in Pro Tools. It's a very deep piece of software, but hopefully this gave you an overview of some of the basics. Thanks for watching.